enthusiasm at which you address certain issues. It encourages us and it lets us know that everything we're doing here is being appreciated by all of you who listen, who dedicate your time, your airtime most especially, and also, your attention. I know that there's so much you're doing today, so much you're doing. You have work, you have school, some of you are home, but you have businesses. But all in all, you find time to always keep your radio locked to mainland 98.3 FM, and that's something that we very, very deeply appreciate. Well, on Situation Room, if you're no strangers to the program, just like the name connotes, we're talking situations, we're talking events, we're talking scenarios that are playing out within our polity and how it affects us as individuals. Now, if you've been going along with the majority of the programs we've been having on here, it seems like we've been doing something of a sectoral review, right? Ministries, department, agencies, talking about how far they've come, what are the problems within these agencies or these ministries, as the case may be, and ultimately what we can do to start to repair it. Last week we had a conversation about the failing sectors that we have, and we're going to continue on that note. We focus primarily on the power sector, right? So today we're going to talk about the education sector and everything that is wrong with it. We will start with a very simple question. What exactly does it mean to be educated in Nigeria today? For many, graduating or going through schools should be something of a representation of years of learning, years of growth, readiness to contribute meaningfully to society. But increasingly, that particular assumption is being questioned. There's a recent report by the Punch newspaper, which we saw yesterday, that continues to point to a very, very troubling reality. A growing number of graduates are leaving school without the skills that is required for them to function effectively in the workplace. They're very difficult to employ. And so a lot of important questions have been raised. What is going on with the education sector? Are our institutions equipping students with the knowledge and the practical skills that they need? Is there something of a widening gap between what they're being taught in the classroom and what the labor market is demanding? We do realize that there's overcrowded classrooms, underfunded schools, frequent disruptions, outdated curricula, just many factors that a lot of people have blamed for this decline. So we want to point out where the disconnect is. Is it the system that is failing the students, or the students are being forced to navigate an education sector that no longer works for them? But beyond identifying the problem, we're going to look at the bigger issue here. What can be done to reverse this trend? What can be done to restore confidence in our Nigerian institutions? Now, today on the program, we'll be talking to Taiwo Ahinaje. He's a managing consultant, Tğᴇ Strategic Solution. He's going to be our guest for the conversation this evening as we discuss Nigeria's ailing education sector and the corresponding poor quality of graduates. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, it's my honor to be with you on this program, Sage. Thank you for having me.
A pleasure always. Thank you so very much. So I did reference that Punch report. Employers had come out to talk about how very unemployable a lot of graduates are. In fact, they do not have communication skills. They have nothing at all to offer. And so we're asking questions. What exactly is the issue? Is it that these students do not understand what is being taught to them? Is it that failures within the education system is what is reflecting in the obvious incompetence that these students express when they come out of school? Or what exactly would you say is responsible for this decline in graduate quality in Nigeria? Is it a failure of governance or the students just completely losing interest?
Okay, thank you so much once again. You see, the challenges we have in the Nigerian education sector is multifaceted, multidimensional. So, and then the output is what we are seeing. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it is what you put into a system that you get at the end of the day. What you input will be the output. So basically, employers are saying graduates cannot meet their expectations. Of course, if you have a job and you have taken somebody through the recruitment process and the person has undergone certain competency tests, eventually you can easily determine that this person is not fit for this job. So it shows that there are some lapses in the Nigerian education system, especially at the tertiary level. But you mentioned soft skills, it goes beyond soft skills. But other areas like the practical or industry experience, For instance, before a student graduates from the university, student is expected to undergo some industrial training exercises just to get practical or technical experience of the theoretical aspect he or she has been exposed to in the academic environment. So most times we don't have this in place. This arrangement is not adequately structured to cater for the needs of the students and meet the expectations of potential employers. So there are digital skills too, which of course, if you lack these skills at this modern time, you are just not going to find a space in the labor market. They're not going to employ you from the basic Microsoft computer literacy skills to data analysis to now artificial intelligence skills, how to use the tools. Graduates are expected to be endowed with some of these skills. Then moral values too, personal attributes. These are things that students should be exposed to within 4 years or more that they are in the academic environment. So, but this is the problem. When policies are being formulated, when even stakeholders are not interviewed or are not involved in the process, and eventually the people that will employ, in this case, the people that will employ the graduates you are turning out, we didn't involve them in policy formulation, and they don't find themselves relevant when it comes to policy formulation because you don't give due regards to them. So eventually they will tell you that you didn't involve us when you were putting this document together. And when it comes to implementation, the universities implement them. Unfortunately, when these graduates are turned out into the society, they come to the labor market, they don't meet our expectations. They can't solve the problems we have. They can't provide solutions to the challenges that we have. So unfortunately, we can't employ them. But the fact is that the challenges we have in this regard are multifaceted, from poor funding to poor remuneration to centralization of educational system. So many challenges are, embedded in this field. So it goes beyond the unemployability of our graduates.
All right, so let's actually now talk about these factors, and we would begin with poor funding, since you decided to land on that point. Nigeria's education crisis, would you say it's caused more by underfunding or the mismanagement of the available funds? Because I did go to check. A total allocation for the year 2025 was 3.52 trillion naira, which was a significant increase from the 1.54 trillion that we had in 2023. Although it's still below the recommendation by UNICEF and UNESCO. In fact, they believe that 15 to 20% of total public expenditure of a budget should go to the education sector. So I go back to my initial question. The aliens in the education sector, do you think it's poor funding, insufficient funding, or a mismanagement of the available funds?
Okay, like I said at the beginning, that it's just a multi-dimensional or multifaceted thing. Now, funding is key. You mentioned the benchmark set by UNESCO, 15 to 20%. So what did we make arrangements for in our 2026 budget? It's 6.1%.
Yeah.
Right. So education, until we begin to see education as an investment, because we've not started, when you see something as an investment, you will want to trade other things for it, just to ensure that you invest fully in that project. Nigeria is yet to see education as an investment. If there is a benchmark recommended by the almighty UNESCO, and we are yet to meet that benchmark, it means we have issues, we have problems, and either we like it or not. If you want to see a government that is serious with education, the first factor, the number one thing you consider is funding. Mention any project or program that we find in the education sector that does not require capital or funding. None. So, and then even the lecturers or the teachers that are the main implementers of policies, how are they treated? It still boils down to the issue of funding. The equipment and facilities that are expected to be in the academic environment or in our schools generally, how do we get them? Funding. So I can acknowledge the fact that even the peanuts being budgeted are even being mismanaged, or the administration has been generally poor. But let's see if a government is serious with education by funding it adequately. We have not met, or we have never met, the benchmark set by UNESCO, and it doesn't show we are serious with education. Honestly, if you are serious and you want to invest in education, the benchmark set by international bodies, try to meet up with those benchmarks first. Then people will see that, come on, some states are doing it. Enugu State budgeted like 33%. Kano budgeted almost 20%. So some states are driving that, but federal government has not shown any. And it also takes me to the issue of centralization. Federal government is carrying more than it can actually bear. Honestly, there is no need to centralize education in such a way that you will be like a patron to the states and even the local government. If there are areas that you can allow this state to function independently with little or no interference from the federal government. So in a nutshell, funding is key, because education is an investment. If you want to show seriousness in education, but to be kind to this government, that's the federal government, especially the current Minister of Education, to be fair to him, I have seen him as someone who is really willing to do so much. He is showing the interest and concern, to bring about positive changes in the Nigerian education system. But it will always be put in a tight corner because of paucity of fund. That's the problem. So if a government does not fund education, I'm sorry, such government is not, especially complying with the benchmark set by UNESCO. I'm sorry, such government is not serious. Even if you are showing the interest, ideas without money will eventually bring about frustration. So that's the problem.
Let's talk about the issue of consistent strike actions. Now, many might want to point accusing fingers at ASUU, for example, that they're the ones who are always perpetrating this strike. But another person who's looking at this holistically will say that, well, ASUU does not necessarily have a choice. They seem to believe that downing tools is the only way to get the government's attention. Unfortunately, the discord between ASUU and the government, the students are the one who suffer that repercussion, where a 4-year course becomes a 7-year course, and it's not like you have a carryover. So should ASUU, for example, the Academic Staff Union of Universities, share in the responsibility of declining standards, seeing as the entire curricula is disrupted? There's strike today, there's strike tomorrow. Students are trying to rush through an entire semester in 2 weeks before they write examination. Is this also one of the catalysts to the poor quality of education given to students, the inconsistency in their academic calendar?
Okay, of course, ASUU is a major stakeholder in the Nigerian educational system, and there is no way you can actually rule out the fact that ASUU is also one of the stakeholders that are affecting in a very, very low proportion, out of the overall percentage. ASUU also has some blames, perennial industrial strikes, though caused by government. But one thing that we have seen over time, except in the last administration, Muhammadu Buhari, is that if ASUU would go on strike for 8 months, 10 months, or thereabouts, whenever they return to work, they will get their salaries. But the students who have wasted months or years will not get anything in compensation. So, but I always want to say that federal government is the key cause. Why does ASUU go on strike? We trace it to lack of government willingness to honor agreements, basically. And ASUU has seen strike as the key tool to get what they want, forgetting that there are other means. For instance, I will always say that you can't hold a country of over 200 million to ransom because of few people in the name of pursuing the interests of your members. Go to court, go to national industrial courts, go and tell the judicial panel or the judges that federal government reached an agreement with you. Then the courts should issue an order to compel federal government to honor the agreement it reached with you. Simple. But ASUU hardly explores this judicial option. Go to court, get a court order to compel federal government to honor your agreement. Yes, If the order is, received and federal government does not know it, that's another ballgame. But ASUU hardly explores that judicial, the main thing they think about most times, which of course they have used to achieve their goals several times too many to count, is industrial action, strike. But I will always say that is not the best option. Go to court, even go for bargaining, go and negotiate, from time to time, because students are actually the key victims or the major victims of every industrial action. So I will advise us to always explore judicial process rather than industrial action when they have any dispute or disagreement with the federal government. Because in this case, we can say ASUU is also, part of the problem.
If you're just joining the conversation, we're talking about Nigeria's ailing education sector and the corresponding poor quality of graduates. This is against the backdrop of a Punch report that highlights employers lamenting that the quality of graduates coming out of tertiary institutions especially are nothing to write home about. They have no skills, whether soft skills, hard skills, none. In fact, most of them do not work in line with what they've studied in the university. They just pick on other careers, and it is having a serious consequence on the labor market. My guest, Tğᴇ, managing consultant, Tğᴇ Strategic Solution. We're highlighting the factors and ultimately how we can solve this particular problem. Let's talk about the UBEC fund misuse. Now, I did realize that there's an arrangement that we have with the international community. There's about 98 billion naira that is just laying there. Now, the only thing that would allow state government, for example, since we talk about decentralization, right, of the education sector, is that state governments are allowed to tap into this UBEC fund, but you must contribute 50% before you can use it. And the explanation that these donors have given is, if you are contributing to a system, you are most likely not going to want to rubbish that system. But if we just give you this money on a platter of gold, you will misuse it. Because of that 50% contributory clause, a lot of states have refused to tap into that fund. And as we speak, 18.5 million children are out of school. In fact, that is the highest number in the world. 18.5 million of Nigerian children are not in school. So let's talk about this. Why is it that states are refusing to access and utilize this funds that's readily available just because of a 50% contribution condition that has been put on that fund?
They call it counterpart funding.
Yes.
Because federal government will contribute. It's actually between federal and state governments. Federal government will contribute, but before the state can have access to what they are entitled to, they must also contribute their own 50%. But unfortunately, most of the states are not taking good advantage of this funding. So it's just because they will tell you that they don't have money. And I tell you, it still borders on the fact that we have not seen education as a priority. Why will you find it difficult, especially when we have out-of-school student percentage, very, very disturbing. So why would you find it difficult to contribute your own funding in order to have access to a larger one? I don't know. It's just because we are not serious in this country, honestly. If we are serious, education should be key. That's why I said from the beginning that once you don't see it as an investment, and an investment that you can sacrifice other things for, you will definitely be looking for excuses why you will not do the right thing by investing in it. Some states are actually taking advantage of it, and I know states like Lagos State is always taking advantage of it. But most of the states that I have access to, I think most of them are from the northern part, and coincidentally, that's the region where we have the highest number of out of school children. Yes. So why would, and if you know the frivolities that these people are spending, I mean politicians generally, why would they find it difficult? It's just a question I'm beginning to even ask myself. Why will you, when you know the implication, the out of school, it will actually help you to reduce the out of school percentage, drastically. But unfortunately, because you have failed to prioritize this, you see it as something that you can't invest in. Just contribute your counterparts funding and have access to the loan. That's the problem. I don't understand. You have asked me a question, but sincerely, I don't want to conclude that this is the reason or that is the reason. But all I can tell you is that it shows the lackadaisical attitude or the unseriousness that we have when it comes to education. sacrifice. Government can sacrifice a lot of things to get people educated. Education is the key. Mandela once said the greatest instrument to make a change is through education. So it means if you don't want to have a change in your state or even at the local government level or at the national level, you will definitely relegate education to the background. That's what we are seeing, and that is why states find it difficult or unnecessary to access something that they can have unfettered access to just by contributing their own quota. It's unfortunate. I really don't have any answer, honestly, to that. I don't know.
I'm not really one for conspiracy theories, right? But we've taken feedback even on this platform where a lot of people say that the lack of education that we see now might be a deliberate thing, because an ignorant society is a society that's very easy to manipulate. And so oftentimes when we see leaders uninterested in educating people, it's mostly because they need to assert some level of control. Just very briefly, I want to get your feedback on that notion that this is part of a deeper scheme. An ignorant society is a malleable society. Is that what you think is happening here? Might it perhaps be a factor, or you think it's an overreach?
Well, I wouldn't want to take a definite stand on that, because I really have not done any investigation in that regard. But I can't rule out the fact that some people can do it deliberately. Of course, if you want to disarm some people, you will be willing to go extra miles to deny them access to things that will empower them. And I can tell you, the greatest empowerment you can have in this life is education, not even money. That's why I always emphasize the fact that if you want to go to school, if you want to get degrees, don't do it because you want to get rich. Do it because you want to make sure that somebody does not tamper or tinker with your thinking faculty, so that somebody will not be able to tell you that vote for me, I will do this for you. As an educated person, you do some research, some findings. You will go beyond what the person has told you and find out if the person is really competent to lead you, not because of what you want to eat or what you want. So basically, if they know that when you get educated, they can actually deny you access to that. Some people can do it for such mischievous reason. So, but I wouldn't want to take any concrete stand on that. While some people may be doing it ignorantly or based on selfishness or based on the fact that they don't see the need for it, others may be doing it deliberately to incapacitate the citizens. Because if you are educated, it means you are armed with whatever you need to fight anybody who wants to confront or conquer you. So it's possible. It's a 50-50 thing if you ask me, but I wouldn't want to see some people deliberately wouldn't want to get their citizens educated.
Right.
And I wouldn't want to rule out the fact that some people could actually do it, to achieve their end goals.
Right. As we begin to round off the conversation, I know you have other commitments. Let's talk about the proliferation of private schools. That has also been linked to the poor quality of students, especially the ones that come out of public institutions. I think we have over 140 private universities at this time. Many say that private universities are only even they're doing well because people have realized the lapses that exist in public schools, and so they feel like private universities are the next best place to take your child to if you want them to come out educated and equipped. And would you blame them? They're public institutions that have no lab, and they have medical students, they have chemistry students with no lab whatsoever, they're training students to a computer science, and they do not even have a computer that students can use to practice. Nothing. It's just theoretical. It's memorizing, passing exam, and not having any skills at the end of the day. So let's talk about this. Do you think that the fact that we have more private universities is why our own public institutions are starting to die a natural death?
Yeah. Based on my knowledge about economics, the basic economics, even the one that we were taught in secondary school, Nigeria has mixed economy, a combination of capitalism and socialism. So it means government can establish businesses just like private individuals, corporate organizations, missionary bodies, and so on, faith-based organizations. So it's a free system. If you have money, venture into the business. But the most important thing is meeting the approval requirement. The National University Commission is the agency in charge of that. So, and I know National University Commission has standards, has requirements that must be met by individuals or bodies that want to establish and run universities in Nigeria. So if you have the money and you meet the requirements, why not venture into it? And let's not forget the fact that the establishment of private universities also provide job opportunities for individuals. So it's not a mischievous agenda if those who have the money and those who have the commitment to set up and run universities are allowed to do so, because our economy or economic system allows that. So people that have, government should just ensure, especially the National University Commission, should just ensure that they meet standards, and of course accreditation process should also be standardized to ensure that they don't meet a lower standard in order to encourage the proliferation of private universities. So if they meet the standard, if they meet the requirements, if they meet the approval permit, why not? Anybody can. If you have the money, say you can also set up your own university if you meet the standard. So I wouldn't kick against allowing private individuals or corporate organizations or faith-based bodies to set up a university and run them if they have the means, if they have the wherewithal. Why not? I'm not doing that.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. Taiwo Ahinaje, Managing Consultant, Tğᴇ Strategic Solution. We spoke about Nigeria's education sector, everything that is wrong with it. And ultimately, as your parting words, as we've highlighted these problems, as you leave now, what would you say to conclude? Or at least solutions you think we can prefer to all the things that are wrong with our education sector here in Nigeria?
Okay, as it affects the point by employers that graduates are not employable, my advice to government, policymakers, is that they should get these stakeholders involved. Employers, I think there is NECA, National Employee Consultative Association. Okay, National Employees Consultative Association. That's like the umbrella body of employers in Nigeria. NECA should be deeply involved in formulation of policy, especially education policies, so that they can tell the government or the policymakers their expectations, that the people or the students that are produced in your universities, before they can meet our expectations, before we can see them as problem solvers and solution providers, these are what we look out for. These are this, these are that. So if such a body is involved, I believe in the course of formulating policies, we will have little or nothing to worry about. But if they are not involved, I'm afraid we will find it difficult to achieve that. Then secondly, government must fund education as an investment. It's just as simple as that. Then there should be restructuring in the Nigerian educational system. We've seen restructuring in electricity, and even in security, it's ongoing. It should also get to education sector. Government should hand off certain roles, so that states can develop or progress at their own pace, so that one state will not retard the other because they use uniform policy, because they use this. No, let them move at their own pace, so that one will not retard the other. So funding and restructuring the education sector, very, very important.
Do you agree with the NEL Fund initiative, by the way? Do you think that's a laudable idea? Because a lot of parents are complaining that because of the NEL Fund initiative, universities have seen the good excuse to start to increase school fees.
Well, it's optional. If you ask me, I would say government should rather give attention to scholarships.
Okay.
Look out for brilliant, excellent students who unfortunately don't have the money to go to school or fund their education. Then identify them, give them scholarships. That will go a long way. Education is not, especially tertiary education, is not for everybody. I do tell people, when you get to GSS 3, that's the end of universal basic education. The subsequent levels is if you have the wherewithal. If you don't have it, but for university, identify excellent, brilliant students who unfortunately don't have the money to take care of their education, then give them scholarships. So I will subscribe to scholarship than NEL Fund. NEL Fund is like a loan. It's a loan. They are expected to pay back at the appropriate time. So it's like postponing the evil day. The money you can't pay now, you will pay later. So why not identify brilliant and excellent students and give them scholarships so that you know that they are endowed when it comes to academic competence, but unfortunately their parents can't sponsor them in the proper way, or they have little or nothing to sponsor themselves. So give them scholarships rather than giving them loan.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. Do enjoy the rest of your evening. We appreciate your insight.
Thank you so much, Sid. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yes. Well, there you have it. That's the first segment of our conversation for today. I did not announce earlier that we'll be having 2 sessions because I needed to be sure that my second guest will be ready to have us. I'm uncertain that he's ready because he's in a meeting at the moment. For the second segment, I wanted us to have a conversation around Nigeria's debt crisis and our sort of an evaluation of our fiscal policies and our long-term economic impact, and the long-term economic impact of our continued borrowing. It was in the papers today. We're owing as much as 155 trillion naira. That's how much money that we're owing, especially with the president asking for $6 billion, which of course the legislators have decided to put pen to paper on. So our debt is increasing, but we want to talk about it. I think we've all been able to establish, even the best economists in the world would tell you that it's not a problem with taking loans. It's okay to take loans, but taking loans for recurrent expenditure is just ridiculousness. Taking loans for capital expenditure, however, might be a very smart thing to do. Biggest economies in the world take loans for capital projects, but then what is the corruption index and antecedents of management that we have here in Nigeria? How are we certain that these loans will be used for purposes that will benefit the ordinary person, regardless of where on the social ladder they're standing or the economic ladder that they're standing? Again, we might need to take a break so I can be sure whether or not my other guest will be able to join, because he is an economic expert. His name is Oꜰ, that's his name, and we don't know for a fact he'll be able to join. However, if he does join, we would have that conversation. Don't forget that when you eventually when we open the phone lines, we will be able to address the 2 subject matters, first on the education sector and then about Nigeria's rising debt profile. Don't go anywhere.
This is Mainland 98.3 FM, the sound of Lagos.
What leadership? I have shown leadership. I have shown you cannot do this. If you do this, you pay for it.
Does it get better or worse? Are the actors ready or not? Are citizens onlookers or bastions of accountability? The questions pile up each day, 1,001. But hey, in the Situation Room, we are not carried away. We only ask the crucial questions and stick it in, because the journey to El Dorado won't pardon missteps.
Based on the law, if you earn any income, you have to pay tax on it.
Join in the Situation Room Mondays to Thursdays from 4 to 5:30 p.m. for the real action.
In the Kano State, they cried it. What happened? Even in Edo State, they cried it. Not what happened. What I would say is, Mr. President is full of strategy.
You want to rubbish one of the governors? He does not believe that he must lose any battle. And you choose your fights now.
On your favorite dial, Mainland 98.3 FM, the Situation Room. Issues, personalities, and perspectives. We are always watching.
Nothing for Nigeria, please shock me again, no. Politics for Nigeria, no, please surprise me again.
Thank you for staying with us. Well, we are indeed lucky. My guest will be joining us soon enough via the phone. And as I said, we're talking about Nigeria's rising debt crisis, an evaluation of our fiscal policies and the economic impact it would have on us as a nation. Now, despite the very essential role that debt plays in sort of enabling structural transformation, it enables development in countries, the rate at which Nigeria's debt is rising is something of a constraint. Our ability to generate sufficient growth, to cope with crisis, to invest in development is starting to tell. In 2023, Nigeria's debt was around $108.3 billion thereabout. It was an increase of like 123% in 2012, and that's roughly 6 times the country's growth rate of GDP, right? And then today, the Punch newspaper tells us that the Senate had expeditiously approved the request of President Bola Tinubu to go for external loans, about $6 billion. And well, the approval came less than 4 hours, honestly. And now, as I said before, it's not the loan that is the problem. That's not what is really upsetting people. It is, are we certain that this loans will be used for something reasonable? And so we want to get clarity. We want an expert to talk to us about loans in itself, the execution of these loans, the projects they're being used for, and what metrics can we use to measure the effectiveness of a loan. If a loan has been taken, how do you know that this loan has started to play its part? What are the factors you look out for? What are the metrics? What are the yardsticks that you use to measure the success of a loan? And also, what sort of scrutiny do we need to check when it comes to conditions attached to said loans? My guest is Olusegun Okwade, FCA. He's an economic and financial expert. Good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us today on the show.
Good evening, Sage, and good evening to all our listeners across the globe. Glad to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining us. So let's go back to history a little bit. How effective has Nigeria's, should I say, conversion of external loans into productive assets been historically since we started borrowing money? Is there anything whatsoever, any instance whatsoever that can guarantee that the loans being collected have been effectively used before? And so based on that, we should trust that new loans will be just as effective.
Thank you very much for that question. I'll practically say the answer is no. Most especially when it comes to advent of the 80s. Before now, Nigeria was not a borrowing country. It was a country that has more than enough because of the natural resources that we are endowed with. In 1976, there was a serious boom in the country. That the problem our leaders faced then was how to actually expend the fund. But because as at then we refused to put the right structure in place in managing the necessary things and prioritizing things that are of importance to the citizen, we started derailing. And we started the borrowing. At the time, an administration came during Obasanjo were able to clear some of our bills, but because there is no proper control, no proper check of activities, we saw what built up to where we are today. I think the major fundamental thing is in finance. Borrowing is really not a challenge, and I saw that in your prologue that you said is how we put some of these things to use. And you ask yourself the question, who are the people monitoring the debt to say, these funds that we are collecting is attached to this development and the execution is actually being carried out. So the repayment will be definitely there. So if you look historically, right from the 80s, Nigeria has not been a good fund manager, in managing external debt that they actually are borrowing. And it is not perfect when you cannot manage the internal revenue being generated and questions are not being asked when funds are misappropriated. These are part of the things.
So let's answer the what and where question. What are these loans being used for, and where are the loans sent to in terms of perhaps ministries, departments and agencies? One time we had taken a loan that was supposed to be used for conditional cash transfer, and economics in many countries even will talk about how there's no reasonable person that should borrow money to expend on projects that does not yield any revenue whatsoever. Borrowing money to share to people is not the wise economic decision to make. So what should I say sectors of our economy do you think loans should be taken for? What specific sectors do you think will yield us so much revenue that at the end of the day we would be able to pay back our loans and start to fix our own structures? What sectors would that be?
Okay, thank you very much. We have various sectors that are very strategic to economic growth. And the first I will actually want to highlight is the Ministry of Petroleum. It's, to me, if the funds we are borrowing is actually used in the development of refining the product that we have, which is crude oil, and be able to sell locally, and even be an hub in Africa. I'm not even talking of West Africa now. You can see the strategic role Dangote is playing in West Africa. You know where he started from. He has expanded his capacity. Afrexim is investing into its refinery to expand the scope to the tune of over $4 billion. So what that speaks to is that if we borrow money and you invest it in the petroleum sector, which is oil and gas, to be able to refine our products locally. You can imagine if we have the 4 refineries functioning and we are processing, we have the market even in West Africa, even in Africa. So the crisis that is happening in the Middle East will not be a thing that will be bothering us as a nation, because we have the crude selling at high capacity, also because we process the crude oil itself to sell to the neighboring nations. We will be selling at a very reasonable price that will attract more customers to yourself. That's one sector. Another sector I consider critical is the stock of energy sector. The first one I spoke to is energy, but we're talking of petroleum. That other one has to do with power. Year in, year out, we've seen a lot of investment on the part of government that we cannot account for. During the period of President Olusegun Obasanjo, we are being told of over 16 billion that was invested in the power sector without increase in capacity of our generation, without increase in the transmission, and the best we could get was to actually privatize the third arm of government, which is the third arm of the power sector, which is distribution. So you ask yourself that if we borrow to fund and build generation set to increase, and there was a time in this country that we are actually exporting power to neighboring countries to generate income. So it will not be difficult for you to pay back whatever you have borrowed, because you'll be generating revenue. Another aspect I feel that if we borrow, we will be at advantage is when we invest in agriculture. Agriculture is an area that if we have seen the level of insecurity, we have given a very high yield to us as a nation. And what do I mean by this? We are blessed with fertile land that we need not to stress ourselves compared to some other nations where they need irrigation before they can survive in terms of their agricultural produce in their nation. So you can imagine if the agricultural sector, which the former IMF, so it's not IMF, African President Adesina, while he was the Minister of Agriculture, a lot was actually invested. But as we speak, because of the level of insecurity, we've had challenges. I think if we look in these 3 areas, cumulatively with education, you discover that will be much more better for it.
Let's talk about our debt to GDP ratio, because a lot of, well, I'll just call them government supporters, really, because that's what they are. And there's not a problem with that. Oftentimes, when we talk about or when we express concern about the rising debt profile, they say, well, we still have a window to borrow. The Federal Executive Council has set a threshold of at least 60%. And at this moment, we're still within 52 to 53%. So we still have an opportunity to borrow more money. But at what point, now that our borrowing is inching towards 160 trillion naira, at what point does debt become unsustainable in practical terms? Must we exhaust the 60% threshold before we start to exercise caution in our borrowing pattern?
It is just an act of indiscipline. When people tell you that we still have window at which we can borrow, the question I always ask myself is, the 52% you're currently having as your debt to GDP, how much have you maximized to generate more revenue for yourself, to reduce that capacity maybe to 20%, 30%, so that you can create the window? We started at 0% to get to this 52%. And the question therein is that, are we borrowing to sustain infrastructure as claimed? During the last administration, we borrowed to actually work on a real system, a very laudable initiative to ease the process of logistics, transportation system. But you and I understand what we were faced with in terms of attack by the terrorists, banditries, to make sure that they frustrate that particular thing. And you see, when you are borrowing for specifics like that, the question there is that you have a plan of repayment. And I know at a specific time, for over 6 months, the real system were not working. And you are accumulating interest without recouping income on the borrowing that you have made. These are part of the problem that gives complex to some of the debt profile they are actually having. If there is proper monitoring to make sure that loans that are being actually requested for are used judiciously, it is level of indiscipline, level of corruption that has, because at times, you see, the tax conditional transfer that you made mention of, I was part of the people that criticized that. How can you borrow money to give? So I want to give straight. You asked me, I looked at you, and I said, straight, my sister, I think I need to help you. And I go ahead to start borrowing money from Joseph to give to you. When it's not that you are going to invest that money and give back to me, it does not make logical sense. Assuming that I'm giving you the fund, you are borrowing it for investment that will yield return to build you and later repay back to me. It's a different thing entirely. And you all know how that money, we keep asking ourselves, here is the database of the people that those transfers were made to. Up to now, we cannot get that. How did you even generate the data that you use in disbursing the funds? Can we have the track record of the disbursement that were actually made? So remember when we had the feed the children policy, where so much money was invested to it. We have people in my local area where they did not even smell. We were actually relying on individuals in the locality to put those things. So the fundamental of it is that funds are borrowed, but there is no system to checkmate the activities of what some of those funds are actually meant for. We've seen instances where projects are actually commissioned without even doing it. These are the fundamental problems that we have. I keep telling people, borrowing is really not the problem. I'm a developed country, America, UK, they borrow. But the only difference between them and ourselves is that they put to you, there's a system that checkmates the activities of the managers, the fund managers of their nation. For here, we see diversion of funds without any iota of apology on things that are happening. And I think that is critical if we must move on, even with this borrowing. Otherwise, children on board will definitely be part of the people that will be paying some of these debts that we're talking about.
I can appreciate the fact that you laid a lot of emphasis on monitoring, oversight, and I think that leads us straight to the legislators, because they are part of the people who have been receiving let me call it blasting. Forgive the informality of my tone. Nigerians have been very upset with them, especially because of the speed with which they approved that $6 billion loan as suggested by the president. So let's talk about fiscal accountability, right? Shouldn't there be stricter parliamentary scrutiny, or at least public consultation, before large-scale borrowing like this one is approved? I mean, who watches the watchman at the end of the day is the question I'm asking here.
Okay, well, for me, there should be proper scrutiny. But you discover that the politicians that we have at the end of affairs that are supposed to be check and balances have decided to consolidate and hide under the premise that they are not here to frustrate, the ideas of the executive to the detriment of the citizen. And that is where I consider the failure of the legislators as we speak. You are supposed to be a check on the activities of the executive. Ask questions. There has been several borrowing by this administration. And as a matter of fact, the Minister of Finance and the coordinating Minister of Economy, came to tell us that we are actually having so much fun during the removal of subsidy that can cater for a lot of things. As a matter of fact, this morning we were reading on the headline that they're actually looking at the windfall that will have from the increase in the price of crude oil at the international market. And this service that you are still approving, you have more income on the crude or on the sales of crude, because compared to the last administration, we've been able to raise the power of the production. I think we now operate between 1,500 and 1,006 barrels per day. And now we are talking about increasing from the benchmark of 67 to 75 to about $100 at the international market. So you have more income to yourself. What are we actually using those things for? We've been able to generate internally. I'm sure you will listen to the Nigerian Revenue Service on what they were able to generate in the last fiscal year from taxation. Also, revenue from ports has increased tremendously. But you ask yourself, where are those funds going into that are still necessitating us? And that's why you see me that what you don't monitor or what you don't have control on, when there are no control policy, if it's inevitable, you will definitely spend anywhere you feel that you need to spend. And that's the major critical problem. The legislators have not done what is expected of them, asking questions. And when you don't ask questions, it's assumed that you are actually collaborating. Because when you borrow funds for specific projects and it's not being executed, how do you as legislator go back to your constituency to tell them of the greater development that you are doing in Abuja that will impact on the common man in the village? But because even we the citizens, do we ask questions? The answer is no. Do we ask questions from the legislators that are representing us? Because they check the activity of the executive. The citizens are supposed to ask questions from the legislative arm because they are representing us. How much have you been able to stand the gap in defending to make sure that the executive are not actually misappropriating our funds? They are using it for the benefit of the people, because part of the things they are supposed to do, we have this specific project in this area, the executive will carry it out. But I'm sure you know that even the legislator, share their constituency project, they themselves are executing projects where they are supposed to have given that to the executive to carry out. And these are part of the overlapping problem that we have that's not allowing them to carry out the oversight function expected of them.
I would like to ask a question. I just have two more so that we can let you go. What are the implications of borrowing in foreign currency, for example? A country like ours that faces such volatility with our exchange rate, which means that our foreign debt can actually increase exponentially without us borrowing more. The exchange rate puts us in a very, very difficult position. So what do you consider to be the broader implication of continued borrowing, especially foreign debt, knowing how very volatile our exchange rate currently is?
Yeah, so let me say the volatility of the currency that we have is to me man-made. It's a problem we created ourselves because we refuse to do the needful. When you borrow and you make those borrowing to be invested in production, what that does for you is it comes on the long run to strengthen your currency, because when certain things are produced and you dish them out, you earn more foreign exchange to reduce, to empower your currency as a nation. But as a nation, we have suddenly become a consuming nation. And when you go about consuming, it cannot add to the bottom line of you strengthening even your currency. All that CBN have actually been doing is to be cushioning the effect with some of the funds that they have, because there is no productive arm of the sector that is actually functioning. The other one that I would have considered is, you can imagine if we are producing our fuel locally and we are selling to outside world, in dollars, maybe the neighboring country. You can imagine what we'll be earning our agricultural produce, if there has been security to allow our farmers go to town. There was a time in this country when cocoa is actually being exported out. We have the best farm produce that can earn us good foreign exchange, but we are not productive, and that is the major fulcrum of the major problem that we are faced with in terms of the volatility of our currency. We are not competing the way we are supposed to be competing with other people. Go to the Asian country, go to China. What do? They do so much mass production, push it out to the people to earn more income for themselves. But what we do is that we rely to even produce to the extent that the independent marketer release so much in importing fuel as against produced locally, so that we can make those things. You can imagine, even if government, a lot of us have criticized the government by saying government should not get involved in business. What you should do is to create the enabling environment, hand over this refinery to people who understand the business. So imagine we having 5 refineries functioning, 4 that the government is giving on PPP arrangement with Dangote, and they are competing. Competition, what competition does is that it gives the consumer the opportunity, the privilege to have choice. With the current decentralization of these fuel prices, I'm sure you know there are filling stations that are selling 1,320, some are selling 1,310, some are selling 1,305, and people have choice to say, okay, this 10 naira, this 5 naira, it looks so small, but I will not patronize the other. Forcing other people who might want to exploit the citizen to come to that actualization of saying, since this person is making more patronage, it would automatically force down their price. But what have we seen? Turnaround maintenance is actually being paid on all these refineries that are not functioning, and we keep borrowing to fund those kind of a project, which we suppose to have actually hand over to individuals to be productive. I will end up to tell you that if we do not start producing in the country, we will continue to get worse than whatever we can ever talk or dream of.
You actually had answered the question that I was going to ask, because I was going to ask what would be a viable alternative to borrowing, but you said it: up production, exports, so that we're able to remove pressure from our currency. Thank you so very much for your time. I was going to say in another 20 years, what do we need to do? But I think you've answered the question. We appreciate you, sir. My guest, Mr. Olusegun Okwade, economic and financial expert. He spoke to us about Nigeria's rising debt crisis and an evaluation of our fiscal policies and the long-term economic impact. We appreciate you, sir. Thank you so very much for joining us on such short notice.
Thank you very much for having me this evening. I wish you a very wonderful time.
And you too. Thank you so much. Well, there you have it, our conversation for Situation Room today. We spoke about 2 very critical things. First, we spoke about the education sector. We spoke about strike, poor welfare. We spoke about the curricula. We spoke about the will of government to invest in our public institution. We spoke about the proliferation of private schools. We spoke about the quality of education even offered to these students, and a collective complaint by employers that a lot of the graduates coming out of institutions, especially public institutions, are nothing to write home about. They have no skills. Is Nigeria's education system rewarding memorization rather than intelligence? Is that what's happening? They pass exams, they are first-class graduates. They don't even know how to turn on a computer. They don't know how to speak proper English. They have no soft skills. They cannot do teamwork. They don't even understand how to write a proposal. Why is that the case? Is it because of all of the ills? Is it infrastructural problems? Is it poor funding? Is it because of strikes? What is the issue, and how do we solve that particular problem? And then we segue to the second segment, where we spoke about our borrowing pattern in Nigeria. Our debt continues to rise, 159 trillion naira. That's where we're at the moment, and we're asking, what do you use these borrowed funds to do? What sectors do we need to focus on? Since we are bent on borrowing money, fine, but what sectors are you using this money to repair? My guest seems to think if we focus on power, if we focus on the energy sector, if we focus on agriculture, it will be good. We can make money. If you focus on electricity, for example, people can run their businesses, production can happen, manufacturing can be encouraged, we can export things that we make, we can also use use them here domestically. If we focus with mechanized farming, or mechanizing farming as Prince Wires will call it, it helps them to optimize their production, and we will be fine. We will make this money, we will pay back our loans, and we would be just fine. But then again, that's not what we see. We're borrowing money for conditional cash transfer, etc., etc. Let's have a conversation. 09136000410. That's the number to dial. 09136000410. Our WhatsApp line is 09136000430. We're live on Facebook as well at Mainland 98.3 FM is where you find us. Please, let's keep it brief. We have less than 10 minutes to leave the studio. Hello.
Hello, Sing. Good afternoon.
Yes, welcome.
Just like one of your guests here on, this is Mr. James from Agbado. So it is all about if we have plans for the future generation. For instance, I remember during the time of regional government, we did something in western part of this country that made people to take access, take the advantage of going to school to expand their knowledge. There are people that are they are very brilliant, but they do not have the wherewithal to be sponsored with. So these people have been adversely affected from going to school. So this issue of net fund, I think if Nigeria had been, let's say, serious about making those people that have the all it takes to be well educated and contribute for the growth of the country, they would have done something better to open the floodgate for those who have this intellect to come into the who have the academic wherewithal to pursue it to the very end, to come in and acquire more knowledge and sagacity. So this is where government has failed. And the issue of borrowing, it has become a norm, no accountability. That is why they go borrowing free without having any kind of thought that if eventually I didn't give good account of my borrowing, I'm going to face the music at the end of the day, because it has become a usual practice. That's my contribution. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for calling. We appreciate you. We have a message here. Good day, sir. We don't have leaders. Okay. Here for Dosage said that one. We have a good. Hold on. Sorry. Good evening, Sage, and good evening to the guest. Like the guest has rightly opined, where and how does these loan get managed? We're still suffering from infrastructural decay in all sectors, even with the suspension of subsidies on both power, energy, fuel. No one can tell us where we have been investing all these monies that we borrow. Take it or leave it. The new loan is meant for running 2027 election. After all, there will be no accountability. James from Agbado sent that particular message. We have here, good evening, Sage. Your guests have spoken well. Let's look at the borrowing since the coming of APC, right from the late Muhammadu Buhari. During the school feeding process, every Nigerian was not even in support of it. But the late president and his vice went on with the project. I was at Akure. I didn't see any school with food. Likewise, at my area in Mowe, nothing like food for the students. Billions of naira was spent on that project. It's the same thing until today. With a huge amount of money borrowed, can you just point a single thing that they have to show for it? You knew that this current government has borrowed more than any government so far. Why is oil subsidy not available anymore? What did they do with the subsidy money? The government is reckless with their spending. Friday from Mowe sends that particular message. We can still take a few more phone calls. 09136 000 410 09136 000 410. We can take your WhatsApp messages 09136 000 430. We can also take text messages as well as messages on our Facebook as we're streaming at this moment. It's at Mainland 98.3 FM. That's how you find us on our streaming platform. You can contribute to either of the two subject matters that has been raised this evening, either with the education sector and everything that is wrong with it, or you can talk to us about our continued borrowing pattern. Why are we borrowing monies that we're yet to see the impact? Do we have to exhaust the threshold as put forward by the Federal Executive Council? Yes, we have an opportunity to borrow, but then should we just because we can? You can doesn't mean that you should. Also, what is really holding us back from maximizing our internally generated revenue? Taxation, increase, removal of subsidy. What are we doing with the internally generated revenue is another question. Hello.
Hello, good evening.
Evening to you, welcome.
Yeah, this is Prince Ademola from Mowe.
Yes.
Thank you for all the good things you are doing already there. When we talk of this country, especially those in government, they are just there just to take care of themselves. Imagine this borrowing. the cost of government is so much, and we need to sustain it. Where you have that something, 40 something, 50 something ministers, special assistants, special this and that. We have many of these. These are the problems we are facing. If there is a target, there is a focus. That okay, when we are borrowing, this is what we are going to do. We don't have this problem. But since this APC came in, it has been that borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. On the issue of education or even other things, there is no focus. Sincerely speaking, there is no focus. Only God will take care of this country and pick those who will have focus and lead us to the Eduardo we are waiting for. Thank you. Well done.
Well, thank you very much for your call. We appreciate you for calling. Well, I think we can leave the studio now. We do have a commercial in another 3 minutes. Thank you so very much for your time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for always joining us on these programs. It's important that we talk about these things because it affects you and I. The monies that are being borrowed, remember, in one way or the other, we will contribute to the paying of these loans. And so it's important that we look at it. Since we have a Senate that, unfortunately, a lot of Nigerians do not trust to carry out their oversight function, especially with the speed with which they sent certain requests for certain monies, and we don't necessarily see a lot of scrutiny before these loans are sent to. It's not really up to the Nigerian people to ask questions. You're borrowing money on behalf of Nigeria. We are Nigerians, so we should get some sort of explanation as to what you're using this money for. Put it in education, put it in the power sector, allow for manufacturing to improve so that we're not putting our currency under so much pressure, so that we don't even have any reason to borrow money excessively. We can generate money. You're making money. There's taxation. Subsidies have been removed. There's more money is now available to the governors, to the subnationals. So why do we need to borrow money? Why do we need to borrow money if we're making money internally? So now our internal debts are increasing, our external debts is increasing as well. Although this administration has said that they're going to minimize their ways and means loans, so we're not going to borrow money from the CBN anymore. But well, okay, is all I'm going to say. Thank you so much for your time. It's time for us to step aside. Don't forget to join the sports show at 6 p.m. That's right after the news at 5:30. The sports show is at 6. We have global clusters at 7. At 8, we have shenanigans. At 9, we have Kemisola Muradeyo with Love and Life. Enjoy the rest of the programs coming your way. My name is Sage Babalola. Stay with us.
When the airwaves in your market become more